All right, so I wanted to share my experience of my spiritual journey and how it has led me to Jesus Christ. And if you are a truth seeker and uh, hearing that makes you cringe a little bit, I understand because I was that way not too long ago. So I encourage you, if you are a truth seeker, to be open-minded, because even when I was averse to Christianity, I did know that it was a possibility because I knew that I did not have all of the answers. And I think if anyone genuinely wants to know the truth, it will be revealed and it will be Jesus. But unfortunately, there are many spiritual philosophies and teachings today that appease to those who don't want to know the truth. They want some partial truth, but at the end of the day, they just want to live to serve themselves. With that said, I will start my journey. So, the start of my spiritual journey, so just real quick, grew up surface level Catholic with not any strong belief or any strong familial beliefs in God or Jesus. But I'd go to church every once in a while and whatnot. And then around the age of 14, I became angsty punk rocker atheist, which lasted for a long time. And then when I was a senior in high school, I started smoking marijuana, which made me a little more peaceful, I guess. Not as angsty. At least on the surface, it was still in there. Um, and then I moved up to college and started smoking more often since I lived by myself, not with my parents. And I experimented with mushrooms. And through mushrooms, I started having more experiences that pretty much, you know, gave me spiritual philosophies and experiences. And now I understand that spiritual does not necessarily mean good. If we want to talk about what it is a spirit, we are spirits as people. So, to say spirituality in a broad sense is to just interact with the spiritual realm. But if we, obviously any sane person wouldn't want to open themselves up to any given human being. You know what I'm saying? Like, you wouldn't want to be, vulnerable in a room with a serial killer. Obviously, we want to be discerning of the people that we interact with, and especially, psychedelic, meditative, any sort of interaction with the spiritual realm. We are very vulnerable, whether we realize it or not, because these spirits, demons, whatever, even non-demonic, anything in the spiritual realm can see in us a lot more than we can see them, especially the average person. Uh, some people would argue have more discerning, more discernment of spiritual matters, but that's not really what's important. So what is important? What I was speaking of is to just know, opening yourself up to the spiritual realm, you should absolutely be intentful and discerning, which is, once I get to that part of the story, where Christ comes in, because he is our intercessor to God, who is holiness and truth and goodness and love and righteousness. And that's what we want to be connecting with, not just the multitude of what's in the spiritual realm. Because once again, that would be like opening up to the multitude of what people have to offer, a lot of which, any right thinking person would not want to be a part of. So anyways, with that said, so I had experiences on mushrooms and LSD, which led me to experience falsely and believe that everything is God and everything is one and we're a part of God, and that good and bad are just parts of God, different expressions of God. That God is not just goodness, and there is an evil force or the devil, demonic realm. That it's all just God, you know. And so that's what I was playing with for a while there, and I had, through meditating and psychedelic experiences, I would just kind of merge in this feeling of merging into everything, and I thought that that's what spirituality was all about. But now I see that that is true spirituality, at least I would say, is about, you know, living of the spirit as opposed to living of the flesh, which are separate, you know, where I used to think it was all just one thing, expressing itself different ways. I can follow a fleshy desire or I could follow a selfless desire. I could do either any moment as long as I have the understanding that it's all different plays of the spirit and different plays of God, which I see are not true. So after having these sorts of experiences, I got into shamanism, and I want to be kind of as brief as possible as I can on these aspects of my journey because they're not the most important thing. But I studied with a shaman for close to 3 years, and I would go to her house very often, like at least once a week usually. She would have healing circles where we would do what is called shamanic journeying. You kind of like go into trance with a drum or a rattle or whatever, and it would be a circle of people doing that and one person laying in the middle on a mat, and you would be journeying to heal that person, and you would often have visions of their past or whatever's troubling them, maybe something ancestral, etc., etc. Sometimes we would just do hands-on healing work where you could like feel heavy layers of energy and you would move it, doing different practices, blah, blah, whatever. And though I really enjoyed that and I felt like I had learned a lot in that period of my life, I also always felt that it wasn't it, because to me, what is healing if you have to keep going back? It's like someone would come 1 week and we would heal something going on in one area of their life or one area of their energetic body, and then the next week they come back and there's something going on somewhere else. So it's like going to the doctor and you just get a pill, pharmaceutical. It's like a spiritual pharmaceutical. It's like, oh, we healed this thing, but then there's the side effects, right? Something else gets messed up because of it. So that's not healing to me. Healing to me is finding the root and fixing that, not the symptoms. And also healing in that tier, which is a very big thing in the world, whether it's through Reiki, shamanism, ayahuasca. There's so many healing modalities out there now. I'm sure I haven't even heard about half of them, but the way I understand it now, we're trying to heal our flesh, which cannot be healed because our flesh is death. If you look at, so ironically enough, a friend of mine that I studied with under this shaman passed away recently, and I went to her funeral, and I saw her body, and it wasn't her. It's just a piece of meat. It didn't even look like her. It was dead. There's no life in it. So therefore, our flesh is inherently death because it has no life in it without a spirit inside of it. So when we use our life, when we use our spirit to live for the flesh, the things of the flesh, whether it's lust or selfishness, greed, all of those aspects, we're living for death. And Jesus said the wages of sin is death. And it makes perfect sense because when you're living for the part of us that is dead, the flesh, we're living for death, which is foolish. So these healing modalities we have traumas in our bodies, we have bad memories stored in our bodies, whatever it may be, and we're trying to heal those things. I'm not saying there's absolutely no value in it, but when we're doing those things separate from Christ, separate from God, it's like the whole focus is on healing yourself or healing another. Yeah, and God doesn't really have much of a play in it. It's never going to work because you're trying to heal something that is inherently dead, you know? So to me, healing is having a relationship with God and being in the Spirit and finding the steering wheel of this vehicle and consciously choosing to live the way we were designed to live righteously, to live of the Spirit, and through that, most importantly, through grace, through the relationship with God, we have a natural peace. So our job is to consciously choose that relationship and to keep that relationship and to walk by the Spirit, as it talks about in the Bible. And it says the fruits of the Spirit are self-control, love, joy, peace, all of these things. And when we're living for the flesh, we don't have those things. We're chasing those things, which is backwards. We're trying to use the flesh to attain the things of the fruits of the Spirit. Only the Spirit can give us those things. So anyways, and one thing I'd like to add is a big thing I've learned on this journey is that there are so many half-truths and so many of these modern day spiritual teachings, and that's why people fall for them. But just beware of them. If you find the truth, you will be sustained in a steady way. And a lot of these false teachings, they kind of encourage like, healing is not linear. That's like a big phrase that's used nowadays. And not to say that I found God, now I'm completely free from suffering or anything like this, but the tremendous ups and downs I see a lot of people go through because they don't have faith and they don't have a true relationship with the living God, is because these spiritual ups are actually just emotional responses and serotonin and whatnot. And not to say that there is no spiritual truth there, but the falsity that is there will make you suffer and it will bring you back down. So anyways, went through the shamanism. That was probably like 4 years ago. So since then, I've just kind of been, doing my own things, playing music and having my own spiritual practices, like meditating and, just this philosophy that I can be one with everything. And that was kind of my day-to-day. I always really loved Jesus. I just thought the Bible was corrupt, and I thought this idea that he was our Savior was used to keep us in bondage, to make us think that we needed someone or something outside of ourselves to save us, and to keep people from the truth of empowering themselves. And for people that think that, I want to say one thing about this. If you want to talk about being controlled, I don't want to get too much into conspiracies, but if you look into the symbolism and the nature of the powers that be, it is satanic. It is right in our faces. One big thing is the Statue of Liberty. This is something you can research. She is modeled. She was built by Freemasons, who are Satanists at the top of that society. She was modeled after Semiramis, who was the queen of Babylon, the wife of Nimrod, which is biblical. They opposed God very much, and you know, if you watch music videos, listen or TV, you know, you'll see the same occultic, satanic imagery in everything. You know, I mean, you can look up montages of satanic imagery in music videos where they're doing the exact same symbols with their hands that mean the same things in every single one. And it's just like undeniable, especially when you see them montaged in such a way. And also to the point where straight up, you know, some celebrities or whatever would just straight up say, you know, hail, you know, not even trying to hide it. And there is a huge decrease in Christianity. You know, I mean, if Christmas just passed and yesterday, and when you look at the the minusculeness of focus on of Jesus in Christmas, which, you know, isn't even actually his birth if you look deep into that, but that's a whole nother can of worms. You know, he's not the focus anymore. It's become completely a materialistic holiday that's, you know, celebrated by people who are not Christians or believers, or, you know, not to say that Christians and believers can't celebrate Christmas, or that some people that celebrate Christmas are not that, but as far as culturally, the majority, it has nothing to do with Christ anymore. And statistically, Christianity is dropping in our culture, and these other spiritualities I'm speaking of are on the rise. You know, these are things you can look up. Supposedly the rising statistic is spiritual but not religious, and Christianity is on the down. Not to mention, you know, the Holocaust, you know, the lengths that people have gone to exterminate the people of God, you know, because the Jews are of the same God as Christ. You know, you can, it's not that hard to find this information. You know, there is an agenda to get people to turn away from Christ. And this agenda does not care if you believe in love or if you believe in the universe or source and all of these nonsense concepts that are going around nowadays, but these agendas want to turn us away from Jesus. And there's a reason for that, which I guess I'll get to that now. So a few years after my shamanic journey, I moved into the house I'm currently sitting in with my girlfriend, and one night we were both sleeping, and we woke up to an extremely loud bang. And our house is really small. It's like 1,000 square feet, and we don't have a lot of stuff. So I heard this bang, and it was like louder than my drum set loud, you know, like just like, and it was staccato, just like a poof, no ruckus following it, no reverberation, nothing. So we both woke up from it, and I got up and I looked around the house and I couldn't see anything. So it was very strange. And you know, didn't think much of it. So fast forward a couple months after, my girlfriend went away for a week on vacation, and so I think I mentioned this earlier. Oh yeah, I just mentioned this. So I've always liked Jesus. I just thought he was misunderstood. I thought he was a spiritual teacher, a beautiful display of the potential of any human being, as opposed to God in human form that came to save us from the evils of this world, and that still saves us from it. You know, he's still a living being that we can connect with, and that loves and cares for us and saves us. And as he did for me, which I'm about to say. So as I love Jesus, you know, my take on Jesus, I always had a Jesus picture in the past few houses I've lived in. And so my girlfriend's out of town, and I'm just feeling unsettled, especially at night in our house, especially because of the experience with the loud bang. So one night, I'm sleeping in the living room, and I wake up to a curtain rod falling, and just making, you know, very loud sound, and I jump up, and I look at my phone, and it's 3 a.m. on the dot, and I just felt overwhelmed by fear, just like, you know, really, really bad. And so I picked up. Also, I want to add, I've gotten in. I used to seek out arguments with Christians to tell them how the, I would use Bible verses to be like, well, Jesus said this and this, so why do you think that he's this? He's telling us that we could all be like him, and uh, but obviously they would argue for the true Christ, the biblical Christ, and so that was always in the back of my mind. I never completely renounced the possibility, but so I always argued. So anyway, so the curtain around falls, I'm scared. So I pick up this Jesus picture and I look at him and I'm just like, Jesus, if you're the real, living Savior, please do something about this. And I felt a energy, his presence just washed through my whole body from head to toe, and all the fear was gone instantaneously. And I was just kind of like, oh God, like, am I about to, become a Christian? What's going on? It's kind of rocked my world. So from then, that was probably 3 months ago till now, it's been a huge process of, sticking to the faith and, falling back a little bit, and then something else will happen and I come back, So the next day, I'm sitting in my living room just thinking about all this, and I looked at the ceiling. So just really quick, I wanted to add, I think I mentioned I used to make punk rock music, and as I got into the shamanism and stuff, I, after a year or so, decided I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to help people. I wanted to make music that could heal and help people. And so there was years of me trying to do that, using these philosophies I've discovered and trying to put them into music. And I started a couple bands here and there and wrote some music, and it just never felt fully right, and I didn't even feel fully healed in myself, so how can I heal these people? So I was in the middle of working on music, then I had this experience, and then the next day I decided, like, well, maybe I should write a song to Jesus. So I started writing this song, and as I finished recording drums or something like this, and as I finished, I looked up at the ceiling and there was a red and white light on my ceiling. And there's a famous painting of Jesus that a saint had in the 1600s where he appeared to her with a red and white light coming out of his hand. And I knew this already, of this painting, because a friend of mine had gifted it to me in a picture frame. So immediately I knew what that meant. Then later on that same day, I believe, I went to go get in my car, and my car is pretty messy, and I usually have receipts on the floor of the driver's side, and those receipts were in the shape of a cross. So I was like, okay, I get it, and there are more signs, I felt like I could see his face in the clouds and things like this, and it was really profound. So I think it was that night I went away to the other side of Florida to stay at a friend's place just to, like, sit with all of this. And I just still felt, I felt like whatever spirits I was mingling with, and I hear this in a lot of testimonies of people that get out of, occultic spirituality and find Jesus, they feel like they're being tormented for a long time after. So I was experiencing that. So to this day, I experience it sometimes. And so I was laying down on this couch, trying to go to sleep, feeling unsettled, and I finally went to sleep. And I had this dream. And at the time, and still, I have a lot of dreams. I stopped smoking marijuana a few months ago. And when you smoke, usually you don't have dreams a lot because of the chemicals and whatnot that are being released during the day. So I stopped smoking. I've been having dreams for a long time, but my dreams were never really profound and like message or anything. It was just kind of, whatever. But this dream was very profound, and I had a dream that I was flying off of the earth uncontrollably. And in the dream, I just called out to Jesus, and the second I said his name, my arms just clenched. They were above my head and they clenched, and I grabbed onto a rope that caught me. And then as soon as I grabbed the rope, a balcony, so I was like, up in the sky somewhere, a balcony just appeared, and the rope just kind of, and I floated and landed on the balcony, and it was great. And I was like, wow. So there's a very clear message, Jesus saves. Jesus saved me in my dream and in these experiences I was having, and more to come. So that happened. And then a few days later, my girlfriend was set to fly back from her vacation, fly back in. And I hadn't told her about any of these experiences yet because I didn't know what she would think. And I felt it was a conversation better had in person. So what happened was, the morning she was flying back in, I woke up with just anxiety. And immediately before I could even take in a breath, my thoughts were like, what if all this is fake? What if all this is in my head? What if none of this really happened? And as I thought all of that, I could hear footsteps pacing in my room. Some sort of spirit, demonic thing. And so I just kind of snapped out of it. I was like, no, this is really happening. This is real. So I told her, and she was, supportive. At the time, I was fanatical. I was like, we have to believe, and that didn't happen. But it's been a process. She would pray with me, and she's been open to it, which I really appreciate. So the first couple of weeks she was back in town, I kind of strayed from the strength of faith I had. I still looked at Jesus as more important than, let's say, Buddha or whatever spiritual mindset I had before, but I didn't see the importance of having a relationship with him to its fullness. So my faith faltered, and one night we were sitting in our living room, and this time we both heard very large footsteps go through our hallway, and I picked up my bass guitar and I walked through the house, ready to strike, and I didn't see anything. So, as expected, I didn't think I was actually going to see anything. So anyways, we just kind of brushed it off. Then a few days later, we went to an Ayahuasca ceremony, and for those who don't know what that is, it is a so-called plant medicine, which it does have benefits, you could say, maybe. I don't want to get too much into that because I still don't exactly know what I believe about it. I think it can help, as I mentioned earlier, heal things in the flesh, traumas, stuff of that nature, but it doesn't lead you directly to truth and to God. So in a sense, it can be more damaging because it can teach you that you can save yourself, that you can heal your flesh, and it can be a sticky path, and I know many people who swear by it, and they do it all of the time, but you don't really see that big of a change in them. So it's kind of like I compare it to a carrot on a stick. You got like a stick over your head, and there's a carrot in front, and you're constantly chasing it. You're like, one day I'm going to drink my 2000th cup of ayahuasca, and then I'm going to be healed. It doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way. You cannot heal that which shall die. And we cannot save ourselves. We need a relationship with our Creator through Jesus, our intercessor. And then we are filled with His Spirit. That is healing. We have a relationship with the Creator of everything. We are healed because we are in the fullness of life, not because we did away with a bad memory. And I also feel that those things naturally happen. The more we look towards Spirit, towards God, instead of our flesh, those things don't affect us anymore because we're not looking in that direction. It's not that we necessarily have to get rid of those things. We just have to walk in a different direction, And when we're living by the flesh, obviously we're going to be tormented by things in the flesh, so that's why we have to live by the Spirit. So anyways, I'm in this ayahuasca ceremony. I don't know if I mentioned this in this video. This is my second time making this video because the audio was really bad the first time, but part of my spiritual journey involves psychedelics and experiences of merging into the oneness of everything, and the so-called ego death, when your ego-based consciousness dissolves into everything, and you feel a oneness with all of creation, God, which is not true. But as that happens, a lot of fear comes on, and it's said it's because the ego is scared of going beyond itself. So what you have to do is, to just surrender into that fear, and then eventually you go into this oneness, which I had experienced many times, and I'm sorry if I'm mentioning this a second time, but one thing I've learned from that is there is no fruit in it. You may have this experience that's psychedelic, and therefore it can be taken as spiritual, as like, whoa, I experienced God, or I experienced this thing, but it doesn't give you a sustainable goodness in life. You just have this experience you can talk about, or that you can look back to, and then you're always chasing that experience. You want to go back to that oneness, and to me, true spirituality is something you find that can keep you. It's a steady process, a steady journey, not just like this one fantastic I met God and then you go back to normal being. Because psychedelics, whether they're plant medicines or whatever, they're drugs. They make these things happen. So anyways, I'm in this ceremony, and I start to feel an ego death coming on. I felt a lot of fear, and I just started to surrender into that fear. And as I started doing that, a voice told me, and I believe the reason this happened is because I started looking to Christ. A voice told me, pay attention, don't just let go into this. So I did, and as I did, I could feel so there's a phrase called a devil on your back, and there are illustrations of this. At my local record store, there is a poster for Queens of the Stone Age, which is a band. The singer has a devil literally wrapped around his back with its hands over his eyes, and then his eyes are looking through the hands. And its tail is like coming around, and that's exactly what I experienced. I could feel that. I could feel it trying to put its tail in me and trying to manipulate my mind and put thoughts in my head that were false. I could feel and like sense the light and the goodness of God coming in, and then how it would step in front and like twist it and contort it and interpret it for me, therefore giving me partial truths that cut God out of the equation, which is what evil wants. It doesn't want us to have a relationship with God. It wants to give us partial truths so that we stay entrapped by it, and wants our souls. And then I just, I called out to Jesus, and I felt like he was, protecting me to an extent, but I also felt like I was in the belly of the beast, like I couldn't really do anything about it. And then I also thought about the crucifixion, in that moment it really appeared to me how powerful this demonic force is. One thing I want to mention too, in the Bible it says that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, we wrestle against, spirit, like evil spirits. And I felt like I was in the presence of evil itself, which has so many flavors, so many representations. We have murder, we have people yelling at each other, any amount of disharmony in creation is all the same force expressing itself different ways. And if you really look into a lot of the most heinous evil acts in history, you will see that there is Satanism behind it. Jeffrey Dahmer, for example, supposedly had an altar of human bones in his living room, that he would conjure demons into himself, you know. So when we see evil in people, we have to understand that there is a spirit inside of them causing that. And when we see it within ourselves, you know, and we're, you know, we have to understand that it is not us. And I could feel that. I could really feel that. And I just felt terrified for hours. You know, the way I always describe the story is picture a horror movie where everyone has to be back inside their house with the doors locked and the windows locked up by 2 in the morning, because at 2 in the morning a beast comes out, and if you're outside you're dead, you know, and you better, you know, be in a place of safety. And I felt like I was outside after 2 in the morning, and just like with my head between my legs, trembling and just hoping that I would be safe, you know, for hours. That's what I went through. And this was my, you know, third time in one of these ceremonies, and it was, I never, you know, I've had so many psychedelic experiences, and they have never caused me any, you know, I always felt I could handle it. I was never scared of it. And but at the same time, they never really gave me a sustainable goodness after the fact. You know, you might feel good for a few days after, but it always wears off, and that's how, you know, evil plays tricks on us. So, you know, and then I started seeing things in people. I could see people look dead, like zombies, like their faces were decrepit. And eventually I just left the circle of people. There was about 40 people, and you're not supposed to leave these circles. It's against the, you know, the ceremony. But I did anyways, and I didn't care what anyone said. You know, people would try to talk to me and ask me what was wrong, and I wouldn't talk to them, and I would just tell them to kind of, you know, back off with my hands. So I walked away, and I waited for the ceremony to end. And as I was sitting at this table, numerous people came up to me to try and get me to come back. And one of them came up to me, and he had a red handkerchief in his shirt pocket. And as he came up to me, that red handkerchief was in the shape of an upside down red pentagram, you know, like the satanic star. And I didn't say anything, and I saw his handkerchief before and after this thing I saw. And it wasn't like that. So it's like God was showing me things, you know, and every, you know, because of the heightened senses of being on this psychedelic, it's very powerful. I could see the like spiritual reality behind everything, and how every interaction, every moment, every decision we make, we can either be drawing closer to God and towards truth, or we can be drawing closer to evil and toward the devil, you know. So anyways, also one thing I want to mention, when I first got to this table, I felt like the Spirit of God just came into my body and picked me up and propelled me away from the circle. Because like I said, I was trembling in a ball for hours, and I got up and just like with all the power, you know, my like perfect posture, just like walked away, you know. And I haven't felt that power in probably ever, you know. I just felt completely like eyes on the prize, just full of holy, good, righteous power, you know. And I was taken away from this circle and sat down. And as I sat down at this table was on a cement slab. My head got lifted up, and there was a weed sticking out of the cement in the shape of a cross. It was amazing. So that was that experience. And then I just knew I was done, you know, and that Christ is the way, and I had to stay vigilant and keep my eyes on the prize from then on till now. So when I was leaving, I left that ceremony, and, you know, a couple days later, I decided to go to a chapel to pray. And it was there's a courtyard at this chapel. As you walk in, there's a giant shepherd's staff. And I went into the chapel and I prayed, and as I was leaving the chapel, my father called me, And I walked across the street to a coffee shop and sat down on the table outside to talk to my dad. And as I'm talking to him, I look down on the floor, and let me see if I can get it out. There is this sitting on the floor. This little shepherd staff. And if you look at them side by side, this to the big shepherd staff, they look almost identical, you know. So that was really profound. And so from that point on, it's been quite a journey, you know. It's been hard for me to figure out what is of truth, what is not of truth. I'm slowly, you know, figuring out more and more. You know, but so all of my spiritually oriented friends don't agree with me about Christ, and then I've been going to churches and meeting a lot of people, and I've learned that a lot of Christians don't have that devotion and inner relationship with themselves and yearning for truth. You know, it might be like, oh, I'm a Christian, but below that, they might be more, in their heart, they might be more focused on the things of this world. You know, and not to say that that's all Christians by any means. So I've found many men that I can relate to, but one person I've found, you know, I've been watching a lot of testimonies on YouTube of people that go through these things, have been through similar journeys, and one man I found, his name was Nathan Wheeler, and he has a 12-hour testimony approximately. It's like 10 different parts, and you know, most videos are about an hour or more. And I'm watching this man's video, and his journey was very similar in some extents. I didn't go too extensive into my journey because it's not the most important part. But, you know, he went through Buddhism, yoga, meditation, astral traveling, you know, all of these, like, spiritual superpowers, many things which I experienced, you know, which give you this taste of, like, this is truer than the church because I'm experiencing things. Whereas in the church, it's, you know, it can be very up here and not in here and not imbibed. It's like, oh, Jesus did this and I believe in him. But it's like, do you truly embody that? Like, do you believe it to the extent that, like, that's the most important thing in your life, you know? And you have, you know, these inner experiences, or like all these signs I've seen where, you know, I see all these things around me. Not that that's the most important part, but, you know, that I feel that that's part of the reason that people are turning to these alternative spiritualities is A, the inner experience isn't as important to the church, and B, you know, all of the heresies that are done in the name of Christ, which is not his fault, of course. It's man's fault for being greedy and twisting, you know, things that are holy, you know, but people do that with everything. So anyways, I was watching this man's testimony. He did shamanism as well. And eventually it all led to him coming to Christ. And I messaged him and I asked him all these questions, like, you know, what do you feel about these spiritual practices? Is it okay to still do them? And all of this stuff. And his answer was very profound. And he said something to the extent of, you know, God, out of his love for us, gave us free will. So we have the ability to create and follow any spiritual practices or beliefs or blah, 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 and create whatever spiritual beliefs we want. But God would ensure that his was filled with the most love. And there is nothing more loving than what Jesus did on the cross for us in any spiritual story. And not to mention, you know, most spiritual teachers like the Buddha and, you know, Muhammad, whoever they may be. Oh, actually, I'm not going to talk about Muhammad because I don't know much about that. But Buddha, for example, never claimed to be God. He never asked to be worshipped. And yet you have all these Buddha statues, you know, all around. Whereas Jesus said he was God in the flesh. And he is. So anyways, yeah, and a lot of these other philosophies about just merging into oneness and all of these things, I kind of, now I recognize how they were so void of love and personhood, personal relationship. And a lot of spiritual teachings will teach you that your person, your identity is an illusion, and that the spiritual path is getting rid of that and attaining a higher level of consciousness. And now I see that that is a farce, and I, I kind of, I know a lot of people that kind of follow that, and they stay in this state of like kind of haziness, that because that sin is living in them, that desire for the things of the flesh is there, and those things create suffering. So instead of giving them to God and giving your life to God, what they do is, these techniques just make you like more passive. For example, I see this a lot with men. You just become kind of more passive. So those things that make you suffer aren't as pronounced. They're not as loud inside of you. You quiet your mind and things like this. Or you transcend your identity. You see that it's all illusion or something. So I kind of was like that for a long time, and but there would be these moments in my life where something would spark my person, and I would feel passionate and alive, and again, and that always felt so much more real to me than this idea of just merging into everything. So the thing about having a relationship with Jesus and God and Christ is you can still fully be you as a person, and then there's the relationship to the Creator, and that's what brings holiness into you. So it's not about like you have to get rid of this part of yourself and only be this or attain this. It's I'm fully me, and I'm living with truth, with God, in relationship and devotion and fellowship, and with other believers, So it's much more real, it speaks to our hearts. We want to have relationship, we want to have love. We don't want to have just this meditative oneness, haziness, or these spiritual experiences where you feel like you're one with everything and it's like ooh la la, but then, the next day you're back to your existential dread. And so I was actually giving this same story to a friend of mine the other day, and as I mentioned, how there's no path that has more love than Jesus dying on the cross, my eyes were taken up, and in the trees outside of my house, I saw a cross in the trees. Like my eyes were just taken directly to that, and these kinds of things just haven't stopped happening to just keep me on track and keep me in the faith. And this friend I'm speaking of, he personally practices what's called Transcendental Meditation, and he's reaped many benefits from it as far as like, taking him out of anxiety and things like this. But he, as I'm mentioning, says he feels it's lacking that love, because it's not personal. And I think this is the false light that, they say Lucifer is a false light, the devil is a false light. So we can have these spiritual experiences without Christ in the center, without God in the center, and think we're connecting to something beyond ourselves, which maybe, yeah, you are connecting to something beyond yourself, but is it something you want to be connecting to, or is it a false light? Is it falsity? And to me, you know true light when you know that, it's sustained. You feel it, you know it. There shouldn't be a doubt. And that comes through reliance on Christ and through a devotion to our relationship with Him and the things of the Spirit, not the things of the flesh. One thing I forgot to mention in my story, I think this is the last thing. Some point in the middle of all of that, after my ayahuasca ceremony, one night I was just praying to Christ with everything I had, asking Him to come into me, asking the Holy Spirit to come into me, just like with every cell in my body, just like please, 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 please. and I woke up in the middle of the night, just anxiety, instantly, things about demons running through my head and all of this stuff. And I went to the bathroom and I came back and laid down, and the anxiety was going through that whole time. And the second I laid down, it all just stopped. Well, not the second I laid down, but after laying down, there was a point where it all just stopped. And I've heard other people talk about this in testimonies where it says it feels like the finger of God touches your heart. And that's exactly what I felt. I felt just love radiating throughout every cell of my body. And I can't deny the power and the pureness I felt, which is another thing many people in these testimonies speak of. It's like these counterfeit meditative experiences can feel very similar to having a godly, holy spirit experience, but it's lacking something. Like I just watched a testimony where someone compared it to dollar store experience as opposed to the real thing, and that's exactly how it feels. It's like meditation can give this momentary sense of peace, distance between you and your suffering or something like this, but a relationship with God, if the Holy Spirit enters you, it is the most pure and loving and beautiful thing I have ever experienced, and it's undeniable. It really is. And so yeah, one more thing I guess I'd like to mention is, I know a lot of people suffer in coming to Christ, especially out of these false spiritualities, because things want to oppress you and keep you away from Christ. And one thing I've learned is, it says in the Bible, is greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. And Jesus says to seek first the kingdom of heaven, and he also says that the kingdom of heaven is inside of you, which that can be a grossly misinterpreted verse. A lot of people think that, heaven is inside of me, and that's what Jesus was trying to teach, is that we didn't need him. But I think heaven is experienced inside of us through yearning to have a relationship with Jesus. So that's one thing I've learned, is like to pray and like come in ourselves and just feel the presence and the peace that he gives us, and not being scared, of these things that attack us, because they can't actually do anything. So remember, he who is in you, so coming in and knowing you're protected, and that God is faithful, and if we ask him to protect us, he will. So those things are just tests of faith, and they'll make us stronger. They'll make you stronger in the long run, so don't be scared. So yeah, I guess that's all I got. Thanks for watching, and I plan on making more videos, especially on a lot of these subjects, the half-truths, and why they seem to be true and why they're not, and how it ties in with real biblical scriptural truth in Christ. So anyways, God bless you all, and thanks for watching, and praise Jesus. Amen.